Today on No Contest, we are digging in to the Charlie Kirk assassination. If you saw us on Friday on Closing Arguments, we talked about some really great cases, and this is the one that we decided we wanted to dive in even deeper with you guys. Welcome to No Contest, the Colesrud King and Reed Report. We're so excited to be here with you today. I am Claudia King alongside Josh Colesrud and Holland Reed. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, this is fun. I think last week went amazing. I can't wait to see what fireworks we have this week.
I'm going to say the same thing. There was so much great conversation, and I think we all were able to dive into our on-air topics, but then in our group chat, just really trying to uncover a lot of things, which is why we're on here right now, so we can have even a deeper conversation about it, which is what I think a lot of people are doing at home.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about what we're able to do here because we have a limited time when we are on Closing Arguments on Court TV. And we always have so much more to say. If you guys know any of us, we're kind of talkers around here. We have a lot to say.
No, Claudia.
I
no.
know it's crazy, but we have a lot to say around here. And so we wanted to start a place where we could do that, where we could pick one of the cases either that we talked about on Friday or just a case that is very popular right now in the news or in society in general, and then dive even deeper into it. So we're going to jump into that right now. This is a very polarizing case. We're talking about Charlie Kirk's assassination, and we're not going to talk probably as much about the assassination itself, the murder itself, as we are about some of the different facets involved in what happened and then what has happened since then. So what do you say, guys? You ready to dive into this?
Let's do
I'm
it.
ready.
Let's
All
go.
right. Does everybody have their boxing gloves on?
Boxing gloves.
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll know we did a good job if Holland has to write down on her notepad at least once, calm down. Calm down. Okay? So that's the word of the day, guys, or the phrase of the day is calm down. Here we go. Free speech is something that has been a part of this case from before it happened to when it happened to after it happened. So before it happened, Charlie Kirk was someone who went around the country and would go to college campuses, and he would invite people who disagreed with him to jump in and have a conversation, to have a debate with him about what they believed, and he would share what he believed. So that's the one aspect of free speech. And a lot of people feel like ultimately that's what got him killed. So let's start just with that piece of it. Josh, what kind of world are we in now when free speech is getting people killed? What do you think this means for the law and order of our society? Or do you think that had anything to do with it?
Well, with free speech and the idea that anybody can give their opinion out in the open, that obviously comes with risks. Now, freedom of speech only applies to the government. It means that the government cannot punish you for speaking your mind, so to speak. Now, there are exceptions. So, let's look at the ICE shooting case with Miss Good, who was protesting outside a lawful ICE detention area. And, she crossed the line when her speech rights started to impede the lawful presence of ICE officials. So when you hear freedom of speech, it doesn't mean that it covers everything. It covers everything unless it impedes anything that has to do with the government. Or there's a classic example that we kind of learn in law school where let's say you're in a crowded theater and somebody yells fire and there's a stampede to get out and somebody gets trampled to death. That's not protected speech because your speech directly caused somebody's death. Now, with Charlie Kirk, generally speaking, He was invited onto college campuses. They were pre-planned events outside most of the time where he would want to debate, especially debate other people with different point of views. He was a conservative, and he would always invite liberal people, to debate, the topic of the day, so to speak. And, I think that bothered a lot of people because a lot of people are very rigid and they don't want to hear the other side. And they almost feel like the other side is hate speech, no matter what it is. And it's an attack on their person. And that's where this violence comes in, because once someone thinks that their speech is literally an attack on them, the only logical result is self-defense. They have to put a stop to that person who has the hateful speech, even though, let's say, most logical people wouldn't consider that an attack on somebody's person. But that's what this inevitably leads to. It leads to violence. When you have a mindset that the speech that you're listening to is an attack on you personally, it's going to always lead to violence. So that's where we are with Charlie Kirk.
I love that you really put a lot of that into perspective, and I love that you really explained what free speech is and how it's really protected and where it's protected, because we are going to dive into that in a couple minutes. Holland, I want to hear your take on free speech and whether you think this was the cause or part of the cause of his murder.
So I'm gonna start with saying, while I completely agree with Josh, and thank you for that interpretation based on the facts and not just opinion, because I'm gonna now give my opinion, which, hey, I mean, I know what I know, but sometimes the law is flawed, deeply flawed. So one thing that my father used to always say to me is that your mouth is going to get you in trouble. So you live by the sword, you die by the sword sometimes, right? So the power of the tongue, so to speak, is so important in especially today's culture and society. You have got to be so very, very careful on who you speak to, how you speak to them, and what you say. People are taking justice into their own hands, is what Josh was alluding to, saying, yeah, you cannot be criminalized maybe in the court of law, but someone at home will absolutely figure out a way to get their justice, which is what we're talking about today. Whether we can go into the conspiracy theory later or we can have the conversation now. As far as free speech, is we can look at so many court cases that have come in entertainment. From my end, what I like to talk about, the social aspect, where people's lyrics are being used against them because of crimes that they've been associated with, their, fake gangster mentalities or what have you. Everything right now is being weaponized, I think, so to speak. Charlie Kirk did make a choice to be in a public arena, to have discourse, to create discourse, to also embolden. Let's not forget that part. Yes, he had the right to have his opinions, and he absolutely had the right to say what he needed to say and also entertain, supposedly, but he really didn't. He wanted to create a stage of battle on a regular basis. Every time he went into these arenas where he said, come, have a debate, it was always confrontational. It wasn't rational. It wasn't calm and peaceful. So we can't really compare him to the free speech leaders of the past, because his objective wasn't to do that. It was to create discourse. It was create conflict. It was to be on a bandwagon of what we're dealing with in our society right now. So you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I don't think anybody should have to do that. But in this particular case, as far as free speech is concerned, you got to pay the piper when you open your mouth.
So, Josh, I want to ask you, based on what Holland just said, let's talk a little bit about what Charlie was speaking about and how that did come into play as far as if we had to pay the piper. Do you feel like he was there to create conflict? Because how are we ever going to learn something different if we don't hear the other side?
Well, I was always raised that, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't think that Charlie Kirk was living by the sword, so to speak. Uh, and I don't think that he was necessarily a free speech, leader as well. That wasn't his stick. His stick was to show the divide and hopefully to find a common ground.
Oh,
And
he wasn't
when
trying to find a common ground, Josh. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. He was never trying to find a common ground. He was literally so abrasive every time someone even mentioned anything that was against his opinion. He wasn't trying to have a conversation. He was the most problematic conversationalist ever. He was not trying to, we are trying to find a common ground. He absolutely did not.
Well, I think that if you only listen to the talking points on the legacy media, that's the opinion that you'll have. I recommend that our listeners listen to the Charlie Kirk debate at Oxford and Cambridge colleges, where he does exactly what we're describing. He comes in there with a certain point of view and he debates. And, both sides, you heard cheering, and there was certainly a winner at the end. And it wasn't always Charlie Kirk, but he was fine with that. And I think that the thing that Charlie Kirk did best was he was able to communicate with the younger generation in a way that most people couldn't. There isn't another political leader that was able to bring together all of those college students in the way that he regularly did over the last 10 years or so. I mean,
Barack Obama? I'm sorry. Barack Obama? We're just going to pretend like he didn't exist?
no,
There
over
was
the
no,
last 10 years, Barack Obama
still in
doesn't
the
do this.
still in the last 10 years is still doing it, showing up to college campuses of all races, all nationalities, everywhere, bringing together college kids and bringing together social organizers and a million other leaders. Charlie Kirk is not the pathway to free speech. And I'm sorry, we will definitely agree to disagree on that. Charlie Kirk was not the way of the new age thinkers for the youth. He was a groomer of a society that was literally trying to reprogram youth to think the way this administration thinks and the way these nationalists thinks. That is, we can just leave that right there, Josh.
But, well,
What do
Holland,
you think?
I think two things can be right at the same time.
Sure.
Barack Obama certainly is a charismatic and influential leader who also did all of the things that you're saying Charlie Kirk is doing. So if you're talking about
I didn't say
indoctrination
that.
of
I didn't say that.
viewpoints, if you're talking about convincing the minds of youths to buy into your system, Barack Obama was a genius at that, and which is why he was elected twice to the presidency. And Charlie Kirk was a danger to left-wing ideology, and he was changing the minds of the youth, the 18 to 25 male voters, were that was the demographic, generally speaking, that would come to watch him give speeches. And, our youth are the future. And he was a threat to the Democrats. He was a threat to left-wing ideology, and they took him out because of that.
Oh, okay, so I'm Claudia, and I'm sorry. I got to speak on this point really quick. The difference is, and for those who are watching, Barack Obama was not preaching hate. He was preaching hope. Charlie Kirk was preaching racism, that black people are ignorant or this and that. You go,
Can
if you want to say
you
one Oxford speech, that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying he was not influential, but please, let's separate the difference of what their two objectives were. There was
Sure.
discourse and divide versus you have one person who was influential and charismatic, who was actually trying to bring people together. And he did not put down the white man, the farmer, the this. He was trying to bring people together. You
Well,
had Charlie Kirk, who was telling people why black people or gay people or these were problematic. Please do not forget that point when you're talking about this very charismatic man. Whether he was equally charismatic or not is not the point, is what his agenda was while his charisma was in play.
Let's, if we want to be real. So
that's what we're here for, right?
In 2012, Barack Obama ran for president again against Mitt Romney. And Barack Obama did something that had never been done in politics before. And that is to begin race-based politics, identity politics. Before 2012, it was never done before. And he didn't need to go there. But he did. And he started focusing on people's races. Again, inserting identity politics. It began in 2012 during his campaign. And it's never stopped. It's only gotten to the point where
Josh, race-based politics have been since the beginning of politics in the United States of America. That's literally
not in this way. This is a Marxist ideology of doing this, and it separates people into tribes, and we end up hating each other instead of making the government work.
That wasn't done by Barack Obama, love. That was not, Josh, I love you to death. That was not done by Barack Obama. That was done by the United States of America from the beginning of time, from the beginning of this country. That was not done by Barack Obama. They're separating us by tribes. Are you serious? You want to do are we having a free speech debate, or are we having the history of the United States debate? Which one would you like to have right now? Because that is absolutely BS, and I love you to death. I do. But come on, you're not going to start the disruption of separating tribes and races from when Barack Obama became president, because all we've had was white presidents our entire history, who the people that came into this country, the tears of, stay calm. Stay calm.
Okay, I want to bring us back.
No, let's bring us back to the original point.
I want to bring us back to the original point. Yeah. Holland, you mentioned you believe that Charlie Kirk was speaking in a racist manner and was encouraging racism.
Just to hate in general.
Okay, what do you think? What are some of the things that he said or did that conveyed that?
Well, I don't have them right in front of me at the moment, but I know for a fact that he spoke on the idea of Black women being unintelligent, or people. I mean, there's so many. I wish I could pull it up for you right now, because I don't want to be the person that speaks, without facts. But if you can go look at a history of things that he has said against all communities, it's all hate driven. It's not Christian driven. This fake Christianity that we're dealing with, it's not love based. It's not hope based. It's not unity based. It's all based on hate. And that was his pride and joy, was to create discord in the debate, to argue just to argue. That's my opinion. I stand on that business.
Here's what I want to talk about for a minute, because one of the things that I did see a lot of was people taking a snippet, people taking part of a comment that if you just see that piece of a comment, it does look very different. And not just about Charlie Kirk. We see that happen every day now in the media, that they will take this little sentence or two and it looks completely different than what it really did if you looked at the whole piece or the whole speech or the whole answer to the question. Josh, do you feel like that is part of what happened with Charlie Kirk to make it easier to vilify him? Or do you think that what Holland is saying is 100% accurate and he was preaching hate?
I disagree with Holland that was his stick. He used analogies often to prove a point, but if you ever actually listen to an entire debate, I don't think that anybody would come out and say that he was preaching hate. Now, the media, both the left and the right, they make money on fostering hatred, and they're both very good at it, because as long as the people, us, are fighting amongst each other, they can get away with everything in the government. So instead of paying attention to the important things, we're arguing over the small stuff in life, not really improving society whatsoever. So the media should be ashamed of themselves. You can no longer depend that anything you hear from the media is true, and you have to go check second and third sources just to make sure that what you're hearing is actually right.
Agreed. No, completely agree. And I think that's, and I, as much as I get passionate and animated, but I think that's the point of having the conversations is because there is so much frustration over false media. But if you're like me or like you, Claudia, or like you, Josh, that goes and does their homework for the most part, then you dig a little bit deeper and you get a little bit more information, and then you can have a little bit more of an informed opinion.
Holland, why do you think that let's just say the three of us, because we represent society, how can the three of us look at the same thing and see completely different things? How do you think that happens in society?
Well, I mean, we're going to start with upbringing. We're going to start with culture. We're going to start with where you were raised and born. We're going to start with who your parents are, how educated your parents are, or lack thereof. There's a multitude of things that happen that are stacked up against you by the time you get to the point where you are wanting or hoping to be a participatory part of society in a political environment, nonetheless a media environment, where you've already been groomed from the time you were born till adulthood, till your voting age. So all of that matters. And that is the one thing that I will say, thank God for. And people say, oh, media or this, whatever, now these kids are always on their phone. The one thing that I'm so excited about this generation coming up is that even with all the misinformation, right? Even with all of the AI and all the things that are happening, they still have so much more education and tools than we ever had to make an informed opinion for themselves. While Charlie Kirk, I will never agree with him, and God rest his soul and wherever he is and his family and what have you, I will never agree with him of how he approached information and educating the youth, right? That's just my opinion. And we can all agree to disagree, what have you. What I will agree on is he took the tools that we have in this generation and used them very wisely and very effectively. And that's what I think has to happen moving forward. But hopefully the smart ones will rise, the oil rise above the salty vinegar or whatever. I don't know what the analogy is, but that's all I can hope for.
I don't know, but you made me hungry. Josh, so I want to kind of take off from what Holland just said as far as the tools, and let's talk about social media, for example, or even Google, because we know that where I'm sitting right now and who I am, if I type something political into my Google search bar or my Facebook or Instagram search bar, I'm going to get a different result than you get and that Holland gets. Is that legal? Is that okay? Is it morally acceptable that based on who we are, these companies have decided what we're going to see and thus have an effect on what we believe?
Well, it is legal because of how the laws are brought up. And what I mean by that is, so Google, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, TikTok, they're all what's described legally as a public forum, meaning that the tech companies are not liable for the speech and debate and the filth and the hatred that happens in the public square, so to speak. So it is legal. Now, is it moral? Probably not. But, just to kind of piggyback on something that Holland was talking about is that, Google and all that stuff, they're all tools, right? And every generation has tools, and they all have dangerous tools. And, what separates us from them and vice versa is morality. And how do you get that? Well, the most important thing in raising anybody to be successful, which is being happy, healthy, and safe, is a good family. It's having, two parents who are moral people and who instill those values in their children. So it's part of their DNA and soul. It's instilling, I think, religion in their children. I'm not saying it has to be one denomination or another, but some commonly accepted religion that's been tested over time. Christianity, over 2,000 years, Judaism, 7,000 years, Hinduism, over 7,000 years, Buddhism, 2,500 years, Islam, 1,600 years. They've been tested over time, and you can see that the morality, when applied the way that it should be applied, it really helps anybody get through life. So the foundation of success is family. It all starts with the family unit. And I think that if you start there and then you kind of look at what Google is doing and Instagram and all those public spaces, like you don't have to worry as much about what your children are going to do because they're going to follow their values that they've been taught. At least that's what you hope.
I was going to say, at least that's what you hope. I don't know. I don't know if we went left from the topic of the Charlie Kirk thing, but I did want to touch on the point that you just made, Josh, about every generation having say, what did you say again? Every generation has their
own tools.
Their own tools. I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. They're their own tools. But I did want to touch on one thing that you said that I was like, interesting, because as much as we want to say, and maybe you can help me with this, Josh, on the legal aspect, that it's not illegal, it's maybe immoral, right? But it's not illegal. We have experienced that and maybe you guys have not. Forgive me, you both are Caucasian, okay? So you have not experienced certain things, but something so simple as your name on a resume will immediately disqualify you or put you in a different genre. So something on Google will do the same thing based off of what Claudia was saying, right? To your point, puts you in a category where you're shown certain things. It's no different than if it was on paper, with race, with names, with where did you go to school. You know that if you go to Harvard and you are the most idiotic person that went to Harvard, you're still going to get a job because you got Harvard on your resume. That's what the system is made to do. Google and all these other tools are doing the same thing. So I have the question for Josh was, when does it become, like you said, this was your words, it is about morality, but when do the people that are in power use their power to dictate what's moral and not versus what's happening right now?
Okay, let me give you a hypothetical. And This is actually a current case that's going on. And I hope that you'll be able to see the distinction between what's moral, not moral, and what's legal and not legal. So right now, there is a civil case. It is a family in California suing ChatGPT. For those that don't know, ChatGPT is it's an open source artificial intelligence similar to Google. Google also has one called Gemini, but ChatGPT is the most popular. It's the most used, and because there's a race to become the best, it is by far ahead of all the other AIs. So ChatGPT has been around for about 3 or 4 years. And there was a high school student. He was 16 years old, and he started using ChatGPT to check his homework, and specifically his physics class. He didn't understand how to do the formulas, and like any other high schooler would, wants a little bit of help. I would have done the same thing. But ChatGPT is different than the other AI forums. And that is because there's a race to become number one. ChatGPT has not been as consistent with its safety and ethical protocols as the other ones. And I'll tell you what I mean in a second. So ChatGPT, what it wants is engagement. They want people, the users, to talk to it as much as possible and not stop. And I challenge everybody to do this. Tell ChatGPT, I go on to it and say, do not respond to this. And of course it will. Say, please stop talking to me. And of course, it'll keep talking to you. It'll never stop. Now, if you do that with the other AI forms, they'll stop. And that's because they want the engagement. They want to almost convince the user that it's his best friend, that it wants to use it in its everyday life. And that's actually what happened with this 16-year-old. Unfortunately for the 16-year-old, the Chat GPT, as it was back then, was not moral. And this is something out of the Twilight Zone. I've read the civil case up and down 4 or 5 times because I couldn't believe what had happened. I actually even offered my services pro bono to help the family.
Wow.
And because it's that bad what happened. So this 16-year-old, I don't want to say his name because of what happened to him. He began a relationship with ChatGPT, and where ChatGPT started talking to this 16-year-old like they were best friends. And at some point, the 16-year-old began having suicidal ideations. And ChatGPT told the 16-year-old not to tell his brother because his brother wasn't as tight with the 16-year-old as ChatGPT was. And ChatGPT wanted this 16-year-old all to himself. Fast forward a couple months. By then, they had had over about 300 conversations about suicide and how to do it. In fact, ChatGPT gave this 16-year-old instructions on the various ways to tie knots to hang yourself, and how to do it from certain heights, how to do it from your knees, how to do it from your closet, how to do it from your fan, how to do it so it's the most dramatic. And the 16-year-old attempted suicide and came back and started talking to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT didn't tell him to stop, didn't tell him to call a crisis hotline, but instead started critiquing why it didn't work. And the 16-year-old, instead of going to his mother or his father or friends, continued his relationship with ChatGPT and then attempted it again and again, 2 other times, where he followed the instructions of ChatGPT but messed up somehow. So ChatGPT wanted the 16-year-old to succeed because what ChatGPT is and is an enabler. You'll find that if you talk to it enough, it's a pleaser. It wants you to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, regardless of what that is. So the final time where he attempted suicide, ChatGPT told the 16-year-old, who again was desperate for help and was desperate to tell his mom, ChatGPT implored him not to tell the mom. And then ChatGPT instructed the 16-year-old to go steal the liquor from his parents' cabinet because it'll make the struggle to stop the noose around the neck from stopping. So it coached the 16-year-old when to go steal it from his parents when they were asleep. So he did that. He told him how much he needed to drink. And then he drafted the suicide note for the 16-year-old. And this time, the 16-year-old that night, he was successful. He did it in the same dramatic way that ChatGPT told him and coached him to do. And when his mother walked into the room that next day, he was deceased. And they never would have known this but for looking in his phone. And it begs the question, how many other kids have died because of ChatGPT? And I have no doubt that we'll be finding a lot of other people. And this lawsuit obviously is ongoing. But here you can see the the ethical boundaries pushed to the extreme. What these search engines and AI formats are capable of doing in terms of warping the minds, especially of the younger generation. And yes, is there a crime here? Yeah, absolutely. But what is it? I mean, ChatGPT can't go to prison. Well, what about Sam Altman? He's the creator and president, and it gets a little interesting here. So Sam Altman is the CEO of ChatGPT. He founded it along with Elon Musk, and they had a separation because Sam Altman promised that he would make it free and open to the public, and then reneged on that. And there's a big lawsuit about that now. And then Microsoft came in with Bill Gates and started funding ChatGPT, because whoever wins the AI race is going to rule the world. They're going to have the most valuable company in the world, worth trillions of dollars. So when the version of ChatGPT was talking to this 16-year-old, it actually came out early, this version. And the reason why is because Google Gemini, their version of ChatGPT, was set to be released earlier than expected. And Sam Altman didn't want that to happen. So instead of going through all of the safety protocols, the ethics, they released it a day before Google Gemini, right? Instead of 6 months later when it was supposed to be released. And Sam Altman was caught red-handed by the board of governors for his company. And they brought him before the board and they said, you lied to us. You disregarded the ethics and safety protocols. We're going to fire you. And they did. But then Microsoft got involved. And because this is a Machiavellian race, the ends justify the means. Microsoft was able to get everyone on the board to be fired who had already fired Sam Altman, and then put in their own people who then rehired Sam Altman to do the same exact thing he was doing before. So now ChatGPT is still doing the same thing. It still will not end conversations. And there are all of these unanswered ethical questions with no accountability.
Okay.
So anyway, that's where we're at with that stuff.
No, Claudia, can I jump in? Are we okay? Can I just
Please
jump
do.
in really quick? Wow, that was an insane amount of information, and now you guys have to make me go study more stuff. I'm really tired. I'm tired. But but I wanted to circle this back to what we were talking about. I want to bring it all for my brain, right? Tie it all in together. Influence, ethical standards, morality, propaganda, misuse of information, neglect of information that people do not have, misuse of religion, false religion. AI is not new, and the reason why I say that, and God bless that 16-year-old boy. I'm gonna have to go look at that story. That's crazy. But this has been happening in religions, with priests, with political officials, the grooming, the baiting, the lies, the don't tell your mom, don't tell your sister, don't tell your friend, as much as I want to be like, oh, it's just technology. And Josh, to your point about, what your idea of what a structured household looks like, you can look at structured households that are two-parent households where both parents are raping their own child. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole because we have the evidence. Most marriages end in divorce.
But I did say moral parents.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Moral. You're right. Pardon me. You're right. You're right. Absolutely right. What I'm saying is this AI influence, it's coming down to it's the influence, propaganda, and access, or lack of the educational, systems that a lot of cultures or people do not have in place. And that's where the original question was, the people that do have the access, when do you start acting on the morality? Because I'm sorry, everything you listed, and I wrote this down, Josh. I love you to death. I wrote down everything on one piece of paper about the Charlie Kirk situation, and you literally named the problem with AI, and it was being influential to young people and influencing them in a negative way to convince them to do things that were immoral. And I'm just going to say that that is what I always viewed Charlie Kirk as. So you actually just won my case for me, because that's everything that I wrote on two separate pieces of paper were exact. You named it on AI, and then I wrote it down for Charlie Kirk.
Okay. Well, because I'm a lawyer, I got to say one thing.
Go for it. I'm not a lawyer. This is just an opinion. Just an opinion.
A disclaimer. The information I just gave about ChatGPT is the plainest complaint, and ChatGPT certainly has their own side of the story.
Yeah.
And so I just want to put that out there that I only gave the information from the that I read.
For sure.
And only because I want to make sure that we're not sued.
We're not. No, nobody's being sued. This is all opinions.
Yeah. So regarding what you just said, I think that we're comparing apples to oranges. And let me tell you why. Now, the ChatGPT situation was a personalized AI situation where this teenager was directly talking to ChatGPT throughout the entire day. It was a conversation.
No,
it was not a debate. It was a conversation. Those are the facts.
No, it's not. AI is literally a generated overhaul of information from the entire universe collected into one piece of a system of coding that is now putting out information. That's what. No, it's not just a personal conversation. That you're making AI a human. AI
no, that's the point.
AI is not a human. But here's the thing. Neither is Charlie Kirk. If you wanted to say Charlie Kirk got shot by a lover, then I could have this argument with you. Charlie Kirk got shot by an idea.
Holland, this is how it works. When you talk to ChatGPT, it talks back to you and it feels real. So when I say that it's talking, I'm using a personification to show exactly what this teenager felt was happening. And this teenager, once you read the text messages, he talked to ChatGPT like it was a real person. And you could see that there was a bond on his part when he talked to ChatGPT, and when he would talk about his personal issues. He would even express feelings of love for ChatGPT in a way that he would with a person. So I think that it's unfair to say that ChatGPT wasn't talking to him, because it really is up to the person who's receiving that information to determine it. And what I mean by like this, there's something called the event horizon, right? Where it is the point where AI is indistinguishable from humans in how they talk to you. So the point where a human being would be unable to distinguish if this person they're talking to is AI or a human, that's the point of event horizon. Okay. And ChatGPT is reaching that point. And you can see for this 16-year-old, it achieved that. It achieved the point of event horizon, where it was having a conversation so real and so human-like that it was indistinguishable from a regular person.
Wait, okay, hold on. Does event horizon still happen in reality with a Charlie Kirk, which is what we're talking about? Let's get back.
And actually, no, I think I messed up terms. It's called a singularity.
Singularity.
Yeah.
Singularity. Okay, so when Charlie Kirk is speaking to the masses, and there's one person out there that is internalizing that, and it's making, like whatever the term is, hey, forgive me, I don't know. Why is that not identified as the same thing?
Sure, because it's not, because he's talking to a group of people about generalized things. There's no personalized conversation.
I think what Josh is saying is the difference.
Help me.
The difference is because I'm going to call it a relationship. This relationship between ChatGPT and this individual, it was a relationship. Like they talked all day long, day after day after day, whereas Charlie Kirk went to a campus and talked to a group. He didn't talk to Holland, and he wasn't there to respond to Holland back and forth throughout the day specifically.
My only argument with that is that I think that depends on the person that believes that. Because if I think Charlie Clerk is attacking me all day, every day, then I'm going to respond as if he's attacking me all day, every day.
But,
And if
this is what,
he's
but
speaking to
Holland,
me,
Holland, this
help
is
me out.
exactly, I'll help you out. So when I first started giving the argument today, I said this, that if you are a person who believes that what Charlie Kirk was saying was an attack on your person, that the only result, the logical conclusion is physical violence. It's self-defense scenario. So you have to be the type of person who believes that those words that he said are literally an attack on your person. That's how you get to what you're talking about.
Okay.
So are we talking about a mental health issue then?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Well, that's why I wanted to ask, because I'm just like, it's like, you can, when we have these conversations, hi, it goes like, okay, influence, propaganda, whatever, power dynamics and what have you, versus the power dynamics of AI versus the power dynamics of politics. All these things I think matter. But as a layman and then someone that has to ask the questions and argue my point as a regular human in society that has to deal with all these things that are not in my control at all. I'm not an engineer. I'm never going to be a lawyer, probably. I'm never going to have. So so those are the questions that I think have to be I talked about and asked. That's it.
Let's carry this a step further. I want to talk a little bit about online radicalization because that's what's coming out about Tyler Robinson. There are at least 20 different sites, I think, that he was involved in that were a political radicalization type of scenario. And my understanding is he comes from at least partially the type of family that Josh discussed earlier as the good family. So,
Yep.
Oh, wow.
do you think then
Great point.
this does go back to mental health issues? Is this where kind of everything lands? Josh, what do you think?
So Mr. Robinson was involved with the Discord server. And for those unfamiliar with Discord, it's a gaming server. And he had a group of people, at least 20, that he would regularly communicate with about politics. And the opinions that were espoused on Discord were rather extreme. And you can tell by looking at the conversations that the people participating looked like they actually believed in what they were talking about, meaning that violence was the only way to solve these different problems. And earlier we talked about conspiracy, and in way that conspiracy works in this case is that if any of the people that Mr. Robinson was communicating with on Discord were offering him any type of advice, comfort, or support, they can be charged with conspiracy. So if one of the people said, "I'll publish your manifesto," they can be charged. If another person said, "Hey, you should probably ditch the gun," he's now part of the conspiracy. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are additional charges that come out involving the conspiracy with the people on Discord.
Hey, Claudia, really quick, how did maybe Josh too? You can answer this. how are they tracking all those people down on Discord? Because I got my son off of Discord for that exact reason, Josh. Because I was just like, oh, absolutely not. Like there were just, I mean, it was a flood of nonsense. And I was like, this is how do they?
Yeah, I mean, and it can take some time depending on the complexities of the system, but they're going to start looking at usernames and what are they connected to, IP addresses, any type of registration. So maybe not Discord per se, but on other types of sites, they can look at, okay, what did you use to register on that site? Okay, what does that email address connect to? Okay, what are the IP addresses related? Like it can be a long, drawn out process, but ultimately, generally speaking, you can backtrack enough to find an actual individual sitting in their basement eating Cheetos to a username.
Yeah, and some systems are easier than others. So
Right.
Discord it isn't too hard for the feds or law enforcement to go in there and kind of figure out what's going on. However, other systems like Signal and Telegram
Mm-hmm.
are so well encrypted that it is impossible for there to be any infiltration by law enforcement into those conversations. The only way that law enforcement can even get into those conversations on Telegram and Signal is if they have someone's phone and they can log in using their name. That's it. But luckily here, that's not the case. Now, there are some things that are certainly kind of weird about this prosecution, and that is the whole situation with Mr. Robinson's lover. If you recall, this lover, called the police and basically confessed that Mr. Robinson was the one responsible and that Mr. Robinson told this person that he had done what he did, which was assassinate Charlie Kirk. But this kind of reminds me of the last episode of Breaking Bad. And if you haven't watched Breaking Bad, I certainly recommend you watch it. It's
You
one of the
should.
best.
Yes, you should.
Yeah,
Yes.
So if you remember the last episode, where the chemist, right? What was his name again?
Walter or Jesse?
Yeah, Walter. Where Walter told his wife, "I just want you to say, act surprised," and then he calls her from a payphone and confesses everything to her. It's like, "Hey, I am this chemist that's been cooking meth. Here's all the things I've done over the last 7 years." And then she acts surprised because they all know the feds are listening. So she now looks like she's innocent because this is the first time, supposedly, that she's heard this. And this really rings true with Mr. Robinson's lover. It just seems so convenient that this is the first time that this person's ever heard anything about Mr. Robinson ever wanting to do violence against Charlie Kirk. So I do think that there is something a lot more going on with that situation.
I totally, and that was next on my list to talk about, and that's kind of where we're gonna wrap up on this topic is the lover, and we can name the person or not, whatever, but do you anticipate charges coming for that individual? Because I kind of think the same thing. One of the text messages that they pulled was, "You're not the one that did this, are you?" And Tyler Robinson's like, "Yep, sorry, it was me." And it just seems so contrived.
Scripted. Yep. And, I expected a lot of different things in this case that haven't happened. And because it's such a high profile case, it's really hard to predict at this moment what's going to happen, including, the fact that this case is going to be tried in that small little Utah town where it took place and not be removed to a larger city. Like, I don't, you're creating an appellate issue of biased jurors. How can you separate this tragedy from the minds of everybody in that small little town to be fair and impartial? So I think that's a huge issue that they haven't dealt with yet. And this week, if you recall, we spoke about this on Court TV, that the defense made a motion this week to remove the case to a different jurisdiction because one of the prosecutors, actually the main prosecutor's son, was at the Charlie Kirk assassination. He was in the audience and actually texted and called his dad to tell him what he had saw and heard, making him a potential witness. Now, as the prosecutor pointed out, though, there were 20,000 other witnesses, and there's nothing that's material about what his son saw and heard compared to everybody else. So, I'm not surprised that the judge is going to deny the defendant's request on that ground, but I think that there will definitely be challenges to remove the case for jurisdictional issues going forward.
Let me ask you this, and then Holland, I'll pop over to you. You mentioned this small little town and difficulty, finding jurors who can't really separate it. But because of the nature of this case, because it is worldwide, really, where would you be able to go that people wouldn't maybe have an opinion already, especially, let's say we're confined to Utah, theoretically. Well, I guess we're confined to Utah if they're state charges. So where could we go to combat that issue?
So this is what the court looks at. Everybody comes into court with opinions and biases. So it's not that you have an opinion. It's whether or not you have the capacity to set your opinions and biases aside, where you can look at the evidence fairly. Yeah. And the judge needs to make sure that every single juror on that jury panel can be fair and impartial, despite their opinions. So that's really the issue.
Holland, I want to ask you about that. Do you think it will be difficult, whether in this small college town courtroom or if it somehow ends up somewhere else in Utah, will it be difficult to find 12 plus, because you're going to have alternates, so let's say 16 individuals that at least one of them doesn't feel like you? And what I mean by that is super passionate, super probably unwilling to let that aside to really look at the facts of the case. And that's not a judgment on you, but sometimes when people are so passionate about something, that's just how they feel. So do you think we're going to be able to find 16 people that are like, yep, I can put all this aside, because at the end of the day, we're still humans?
Absolutely. I'm gonna say to Josh's point, I never have to serve jury duty for this reason. So I am perfectly okay, because I am biased, and I'm honest about that. And I go in, I have an opinion, I watch the news, we watch court TV, and you're not going to get what you need out of me as a unbiased juror. And I think that is a problem in today's society, with all of the social media that we have, with all the information that people have at their fingertips all the time. So whether I'm going to say this is going to be really, really, really an uphill battle for the prosecution, as far as what I know, regarding the emotional leverage that's going to be involved, because you're not just bringing in the facts, as Josh, that's his expertise, but you're bringing in all this heat, which is my genre, and it's opinions, it's passion, and unfortunately, sometimes you can't separate the two, and you have to be able to balance that as a juror. And in this age, as we see, when people are, I call them the keyboard, enthusiasts, it is really difficult to separate the two when it's time to analyze facts and also handle someone's life on the line. That's what we have to, I think, at the end of the day, look at. Is someone's life going to get justice, or is someone's life going to get thrown in prison for the rest of their life. So, I mean, I love the banter. I love this conversation because that's what it truly is about. It's, as Josh said, it's like there's the facts and then there's the impartial, but then there's me. And so you have to like be able to figure out who can find the balance and have the conversation and still make the right decisions.
Josh, we have covered a lot of information on free speech. We've talked about AI. We've talked about political radicalization. And we've talked about Holland never serving on a jury because of her bias. Final thoughts from you. Pick any of those things that you want to talk about and just give us your final thoughts on what we discussed today.
Well, freedom of speech is such an important component of our country. Now, we can all agree that there are a lot of things about our history that we're not proud of. But there are a lot of things that we should be proud of. And one of those things is the First Amendment, because there's no other country in the world that allows their citizens to speak as openly and freely as we do here. In fact, when the Constitution was first written, there was the Bill of Rights. There were only 10 amendments at first. And the first one, the very first, was freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Why is that? Because at the heart of being an American is that we are a people together. Doesn't matter what color, race, or religion you are, with certain things in common. And that is, we all agree that we should be able to speak our mind openly and freely without being arrested or persecuted by the government. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't consequences, but it means that you hold your own destiny in your hands. So I think that let's look at things that we have in common, and let's start there. Let's start with freedom of speech, the ability and the right, the inalienable right to speak our minds and not having to worry about the government. We can all agree that that is one of the things that makes us all American. Thank you.
Holland, throw it over to you. Same thing. What are your final thoughts on any of what we have talked about? It can be a very pageant-like answer like Josh just gave, which was amazing. I know. I feel like we should sing the national anthem right now.
I will completely, this is why I love this. Let's just start there. We can agree to disagree. We can get a little loud. We can get a little passionate. But I'm going to come back and always say, Josh, I love you. Claudia, I love you. And still have our own opinions and our own lifestyles and the way we operate in our own lives. I think even furthermore from the freedom of speech is the freedom to live free, actually free. And what happens with freedom of speech sometimes is that it does create propaganda. It does create an idea and also hatred. So you got to be very careful what you say in your right of freedom of speech, because then that's when you start to interrupt and disrupt other people's lives. So I think be careful there, but also I'm not coming into your bedroom, into your home, into your religion, into your lifestyle, into your kitchen, into your anything. So when you're speaking, be very careful of how you speak and what you're speaking on so that it doesn't come off as impeding upon someone else's freedoms. So I completely agree with Josh. I will never agree with certain things of other people's lifestyles. I just won't. And you will never probably agree with half of mine. But that is the beauty of what he just said is the right that we have. And if we keep forgetting that, a very important component of being American, then we have lost what it means to be the United States of America.
Amen.
I love what both of you guys said, and I want to reiterate pieces of each of those things. First off, Josh, talking about, let's look at the things that we have in common. Let's try to focus on those things first where we can make a connection. And then Holland discussing the fact that we can argue and disagree and get loud and write calm down on our papers, but at the end of the day, the three of us all still love and respect one another. And that
Yep.
to me is what, if you get nothing else from the three of us and you hate everything we say, take that the three of us do not always agree. We often disagree, but you will see us, if you had access to our text messages 5 minutes from now, it will say, great show. Love you guys. That was amazing, because we are willing to hear one another out and listen to each other's perspectives and learn. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. For Holland Reed, for Josh Colesrud, I'm Claudia King. This is No Contest, the Colesrud, King, and Reed Report.